people do care. People do. They try to be a better humans because they realize this is the only place that we have to live and we have to look after it.
When the wind's blowing, that's great, but when it's not blowing, where's the power coming from?
That's why I think that the nuclear is a way to go.
Well, the problem is the waste material of nuclear power.
But I feel that, there's a certain public perception that anything that has to do with the nuclear power, it's bad, it's doomsday and all that. You've touched on something that's really, really interesting as well. Our environment, how we look after it. Everybody's talking about climate change, talking about, what is it that we do, what is it that we could potentially do. Maybe this is a topic for us for today, to see what seems to be the problem, what seems to be happening in the world right now. And I've been thinking about that for quite a while. And I think that individually, many people are really, really looking after the environment compared to how they were 20, 30, 40 years ago. Back then, they were uninformed. Right now, we are fairly informed. And I think genuinely that most of us are taking the right steps towards improving, our environment. I think that the biggest problem is the big companies. Because for the biggest companies, the most important thing is the profit. And it appears to me that when they're talking about environment, they're only talking about it because that's the way they want to be seen, that's the way they want to be viewed by the society. But in reality, they don't really care. They are probably one of the main causes of what's happening. Of course, just to be clear, I'm not trying to say that, there aren't any aspects like, transport, the livestock, and all these things contribute to that. But I think it's the attitude that these companies have towards it. It's all about profits for them. And many people say that, you don't look after your environment, you don't care about your environment. I think, from what I can see, at least here in Scotland, people do care. People do, lots of right things, and they try to be a better humans because they realize this is the only place that we have to live, and we have to look after it. But my problem is that all of these new technologies are being pushed quicker and quicker, and we're talking about this renewable energy and everything, but nobody's talking about the potential downside of it, which is, this stuff's going to have to be recycled somehow. Look at the wind farms. What's going to happen after the expiration date of that wind farm? How are you going to dispose of all that stuff? Do you really think that anyone had put any thought into it?
What would you see the challenge of disposing of it?
Well, think about the size of it. Think about, what are you going to do with it?
Well,
are you going to recycle it, or?
Yeah, it's worth money. So it's just connected with bolts onto concrete on the ground. So the concrete, that'll stay there with the rebar in it. And it's not really causing any environmental problem, just on the landscape. So you'll just go take out the bolts, timber, take them down, pick them up, take them to Scrappy, money back.
Okay, so that's the answer to one of the questions. What about the space all that stuff takes?
Well, the thing is, a lot of the space that it takes is space that's otherwise not very used.
At the moment.
In Scotland. At the moment.
But
if it was to grow more.
Yeah. If you would like to use, because by 2050, I think, a zero carbon emission, that's the plan. And I'm thinking the only way we can do it, we would have to have loads of these renewable sources of energy.
So there's not a problem with space. We're not running out of space at all in any way, shape or form. Somebody pointed out to me that they did the maths. A gentleman that stays near Loch Ness in Scotland pointed out he did the maths and that you could fit everybody in the entire world into Loch Ness, and like you'd have to replace the water that you displace with them. But if you put them in there, they would not break the surface of the water.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So the space issue is not really an issue. Or there's another more popular one that you can fit everybody in the Isle of Man.
Yeah.
But so space is not a problem. There's plenty of space.
No. I don't mean space
So what do
in
you mean
human
then?
terms. I think that the space, in terms of how much space these farms are taking, and at the moment, it's not a problem. But if we were to replace all the fossil fuels with this, at that point, this may become a problem.
Yes, but then it's a new pathway. It's at early stages. So even with the fossil fuels, we improved our ability to extract more energy from them in smaller ways, in more efficient ways. Like even with nuclear power, constantly they've improved upon their ability to extract energy. So they can do, I think it's maybe 95% of that now. They're looking to go further. So the same with fossil fuels. So I guess the idea with renewables is this is where we are just now, but if you go in that direction, if you put the money in it, then you allow it to grow and to develop different, more efficient ways that might take up. So the ways just now are like toddler stage. They're not very efficient.
Yes.
Like the wind power's a problem. When the wind's blowing, that's great, but when it's not blowing, where's the power coming from?
That's why I think that the nuclear is a way to go. Based on all the research that I've done, this would be the most efficient way of delivering a huge amount of energy by taking a very small space. And there's a good thing that you've pointed out. There are these iterations of a technology. Because one day somebody decided that nuclear is too dangerous. The iterations of that technology have not progressed as fast as any other of the technologies that we've been talking about, renewables, because we were led to believe this is too dangerous for us to even tamper with it. And it was based on the old information. It was based on old systems that we had in place. It was based on old technology. The new technology is so much safer. And I think that in the long term, that will be a way better, more sustainable way forward. Of course, I'm not an expert. This is just, one of the wild thoughts that I have.
So the problem with nuclear power, the benefit of nuclear power is that you get huge amount of energy, and nuclear power supplies way more energy in the world than renewable energy, like way more.
Think about CO2 and all the other factors that are taken into account when it comes to that.
Yeah, so it's really useful, and you couldn't...
For the environment. We're talking about from the environment standpoint. What's good for the environment?
Well, the problem is the waste material of nuclear power, and what do you do with that?
I think that the newest technology allows that to be recycled and used as a fuel, further fuel. So that's one of the things that you've pointed out earlier. Unless we invest money into further development, we won't know. We can't resolve that. So it works both ways. Yes, if we invest more money in science, into renewable technology, it will get better. But the problems with there's these new electric vehicles. It's so wonderful. How are you going to dispose all of these batteries if all the vehicles in the world are going to be electric?
Well, you could recycle them. So I don't know if you need to dispose of them.
I don't know too much about that, so I'm not going to say.
You can't recycle toxic waste. They were looking to how could they extract a bit more energy out of it. When you extract that bit more, you make it even more toxic, as far as I understand. What you've got is a smaller quantity. So it's great for getting that last bit of energy out of it. But what do you do with that? Well, you make a giant concrete bunker and you put it under the ground and you seal it over, which is fine. It's not really fine.
This is current solution. I bet human ingenuity is so unbelievable that I bet that if we put enough money and time into it, we would solve that issue as well.
So you seem to have a concept that we're not doing that. Like,
no.
I think we have been doing that for quite a while.
Yes, but we've been investing way more time into these other technologies that, will eventually, in time, will become problematic when it comes to recycling it. Think about amount of money and energy that will take to recycle these turbines, all of these. Think about level of CO2 that will go into recycling that stuff. Think about it, from a logical standpoint. Do you not think it's going to be enormous?
But you can't compare the thing that you've given lots of energy and time and resources to, nuclear power, yeah? We've given lots of that, and we haven't given a lot of power and energy and time and attention to renewables. We haven't done that traditionally. So just to be clear, we're not suddenly just giving all attention to renewables and not doing nuclear energy. People are still building new nuclear power plants across the world.
Of course they do.
Because it's
but it's not advancing as quickly as it could. And think about space-wise, how much space all these farms take compared to the amount of energy they actually generate. Compared to potential...
No, I agree. So they're not there yet. But if you don't give them the attention and the time, then maybe they never get there. The opposite is if you start there is a big problem with nuclear power, and that is that it creates very, very environmentally dangerous waste.
I think that we would need to have an expert here so we could have a conversation with him, because I think that the amount of waste generated by a plant like that wouldn't be as difficult to dispose of and to recycle or whatever than trying to recycle the entire wind farm that would be able to generate the same amount of energy. Plus, as you mentioned before, all of these renewables, they're all great. So wind farms, great when it's windy. But when it's not generating anything. What about solar? What are we going to do with all these solar panels? How are we going to recycle all these solar panels now? They're aging now. We don't really know that yet. We're about to see what they're going to do with it. And then again, human ingenuity will probably, once we reach the point of that becoming a big enough problem, we usually tend to come up with some sort of solutions.
Well, even as you're speaking, so here's the problem as I see it, and I'm not an expert in any way, just from having a little look at it with my limited knowledge, it seems that people are more worried. I've heard it said that there is more concern for the impact that nuclear waste can have when it gets into the environment than there is for nuclear weapons. Because it's almost like you've got a situation with nuclear weapons where nobody wants to push that button because it's too big, it's too massive. Whereas with nuclear waste, sooner or later, things happen. Like look at Fukushima or different natural disasters that allow that waste to get into the environment, and it has huge impact. So that's the problem.
We're talking about
and if you do more of that, then you create more of the potential for those problems.
Historically, you're right.
It was not that long ago.
Yes, but the technology have come a long way since then. And that's one of the things that, yes, there's a fear. And of course, this is an issue. This is an issue that should be addressed. But it comes back to what I've said before. I think that we should give as many really brilliant heads to try to figure out, the best way forward with that.
Well, maybe we can put the toxic waste into some rockets that Elon Musk makes and just fire off into space.
This is exactly what I was thinking.
Fire into the sun.
Exactly what I was thinking, but this is one of the
all life as we know
possible...
it in the universe. I don't know.
I don't know either. There's no simple solution, but I feel that there's a certain public perception that anything that has to do with the nuclear power, it's bad. It's doomsday and all that.
Yeah, I've been affected. I've watched so many animations growing up through the 80s and 90s and about how this is the ultimate evil and it turns everything into this toxic waste dump civilization, industrialized, horrible. Like, that's a trope that I've seen so many times. It's probably ingrained within me to a certain extent to be like, to fear that. And why are those there? Because people have genuine fears that might be what's at stake. So it is a loaded topic.
It is, and we're not trying to make it sound that the renewable sources of energy are bad. There are certain issues with it. There are certain problems that need to be addressed sooner rather than later. Because like I said, these farms, these places, they're aging. And they're going to need to be replaced sooner or later. So it remains to be seen what our governments are intending to do. And the question is, how much money it will cost to recycle a farm like that? And how much waste there's going to be. And, all the entire infrastructure.
I think the nice thing is it's natural because you're getting the energy. Like all these things, so you're getting the energy from the sun. Fundamentally, it's the sun that causes there to be wind. It's the sun that causes there to the water to evaporate and for it to rain, and for the massive amounts of power that you get from rivers and dams all over the place. So it's a natural energy you're tapping into, whereas when you're burning fossil fuels, whether it's coal, oil, or you're enriching uranium, and you're doing that, those are all, they're not natural.
See, we're both in agreement in terms of fossil fuels. We both know they're bad for an environment, and we both know that the reason why they're still being used is because there's huge money to be still made on them, and these companies are not willing just to give up on that. They're not willing to start investing huge amount of money in renewable technology and these new technologies because, while it's still here, we can still take advantage of it. Why would you do that? It's all about profits for these guys. And that's the reality. And even though the governments do have the power to have say in this matter, they benefit from it as well. So they're not going to make too big of a drastic actions, to make an instant difference. And I think that this nuclear power should be still on the table, and we should be able to develop this technology further and consider these shortcomings of that. But I believe that if you consider the shortcomings and the potential benefits, I think the potential benefits would outweigh, all the disadvantages.
So, but here's the thing.
In a long enough time scale.
Nobody is not doing that. We're already doing that. The only difference is we're also exploring renewables. So why is that not the optimal?
My problem is that renewables are always presented as this wonderful solution, and it's only spoken highly of. Whereas when we're talking about this other technology, nuclear technology, everyone is petrified. Everyone is scared. Yes, this is dangerous, but the technology that we've got access to these days is so advanced that it's way over most of our heads. We don't really know yet, what we're capable of. But that's the thing. I feel that there's a disproportional amount of time and energy and money that's being invested in one area compared to the other. I'm not saying that one is better than the other. One's more dangerous than the other.
Well, one is better than the other. Nuclear power is providing more bang for your buck, for your investment.
And apparently it's better for the environment long term. I think that what we need to do, we need to investigate that little further. And perhaps it would be nice to have somebody to talk to, an expert of sorts.
Definitely.
To educate us. Because what we're doing here is just, exploring our ideas, hypotheses, and what do we know? We're just, an average Joes, Ben and Marius, talking nonsense.
Well, that's an invitation. If anybody feels like they've got a bit more expertise on this and they'd love to share it, then it'd be really good to speak with you.
Yes, educate us. This is exactly what we need. This is a journey into discovery, and we really want to learn. So thank you so much for watching today, and see you next week.